is my 2016 Volkswagen Jetta GLI. After 1 year of ownership, this has been one of the best cars I've owned. Here's why. One of my favorite things about this car is the styling. I like just the clean, simple lines of the Mark VI Jetta. When this generation first came out, it was met with a ton of criticism for being boring, bland, and just having a very cheap feeling interior. Luckily, Volkswagen has made incremental changes to the Mark VI Jetta over its lifespan, and by the time we get to this car, the 2016 GLI, it is significantly nicer and a little bit more handsome to look at than the earlier Mark VI Jettas. Under the hood is Volkswagen's 2-liter turbo inline-4 with about 210 horsepower. This is the Gen 3 TSI, and it's one of the main reasons I wanted this car. The Gen 3 is significantly more reliable than the Gen 1 TSI, as it isn't plagued with the oil consumption and timing chain issues that are widespread among the first gens. It's been relatively easy and cheap to maintain as well. I do most of the maintenance myself, and so far everything's been pretty simple. The oil filter is located right here. You just pull off the cover, and I am the furthest thing from a technician, but even I managed to change the training fluid in about half the time the labor guide calls for. I've also done a few light modifications to the car, such as a short throw shifter with solid shift cable bushings, a larger rear sway bar, and the Mark VII GTI Austin style wheels. The Mark VI Jetta was designed with American tastes in mind, which favor a larger and a cheaper car. However, the GLI still does have that German feel that you would expect from a VW. The interior is a little bit nicer than some of the base model Jettas. It does have a soft touch dash. It did have like a gloss black trim, which I have wrapped with the most cliche of vinyl wraps, carbon fiber. It also has leatherette seats, heated front seats, a sunroof, dual zone climate, and parking sensors. This car also has the Fender audio system, which sounds really good, and the infotainment system in general is just very snappy and responsive. It also features Apple CarPlay. VW was one of the first manufacturers to introduce CarPlay in 2016. .210 horsepower doesn't sound like a ton, and it's really not. But the GLI doesn't weigh a whole lot either, so it actually feels quite sprightly behind the wheel. It sounds pretty decent as well. Unfortunately, Volkswagen uses fake engine noise to make the engine sound louder and more powerful than it really is. When buying this car, I had the choice of two transmissions, the amazing 6-speed DSG or the 6-speed manual transmission. Honestly, I was okay with either, but everything else about this car was right, so I ended up with the manual. The short throw shifter is one of my favorite upgrades I've made to this car. It really does improve the shifting feel quite a bit. Beforehand, it was more like rowing a boat than shifting a car. But the short throw, in conjunction with the solid shift cable bushings, have made a really good improvement in the overall shifting feel. Something else that's impressed me quite a bit about this car is the fuel economy. For a vehicle that does 0 to 60 in roughly 6.5 seconds, this car gets great gas mileage. I mean, I've seen as high as close to 40 on the highway during reasonable speeds. And I typically average just under 30 miles per gallon during a decent mix of city and highway driving. It does go down slightly in the winter because I'm warming up the car, and I think the fuel is a slightly different blend. But typically averaging roughly 30 miles per gallon-ish, I think is pretty good for this car. The Jetta GLI isn't without its drawbacks, however. The 1.4 TSI or the 2-liter TDI would get noticeably better fuel economy pretty easily. Also, the GLI has a sport suspension, which isn't as stiff or as harsh as a GTI. However, it is noticeably stiffer than a regular Jetta, so the ride quality isn't particularly smooth on rough roads. Also, on longer trips, you really start to notice the seats aren't super comfortable, and there's a lot of road noise that makes its way into the cabin. This car could definitely use quite a bit more sound deadening material. All things considered, though, this really has been one of the best cars I've had. It does everything I want it to do. I mean, it's relatively fun to drive, all the controls feel responsive, and it handles well. It It gets decent fuel economy, it's been cheap to maintain, and it has all the features I want. It definitely feels like one of those cars that was built by a car enthusiast for a car enthusiast. May not be quite as sharp as a GTI, it's definitely nowhere near as fast as a Golf R, but it's just a fun car and a fun daily driver.